This week's edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com. Welcome to the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking today with Molly Oak from 11Alive WXIA TV. Good morning, Molly.
Hey, Mitch. It's good to see you. I feel like we always just talk on the phone when I'm like, please help.
I know we're running to you at like black tie events when we're not expecting to run into each other, right?
That was also crazy, but you gave me such a sigh of relief because I was so nervous emceeing that because I'm like, these are a bunch of like really important people, and they're probably like, who is this girl? So it's so nice to know that like I couldn't see you, but somewhere out there was a friendly.
So we're out there. There was somebody who's like, "Go by, go by."
And it was fun to know your sister. I was like, I got to make sure I'm the one who interviews her after her dance.
Yeah. So plug for my sister Gail, who is part of a Alzheimer's benefit, and they raised, was it $1.8 million for Alzheimer's research, I think, something like that.
And I was so happy because going into it, I had no idea how much they were expected to raise and hadn't been part of the gala. This is why I should be a part of these things. I don't know even know how to pronounce it.
It's a gala.
But I never knew the standard they set for themselves, and they are like a chapter that raises the most in the country. So to be able to be surprised by that at the end, like minutes before I announced it to the audience, I was getting teary-eyed backstage just hearing all the numbers come in. It was insane and so beautiful and just a wonderful way to spend a Friday night. And your sister did amazing.
She was good. She practiced so much to learn how to dance. Well, they learn how to do that dance, and she did all these practice sessions with the professional dancer. So she was great. We were really proud of her for putting herself out there and doing that. But but let's talk about Molly today. So
I keep talking about other people.
Well, we can talk about Gail later, but Gail had her night, and now this is Molly's night. So there we go. Well, so tell us first about what your role is at 11Alive, kind of what your beat is, what your job is there.
I am a general assignment multimedia journalist at 11Alive, which for those who don't know what that is, you typically probably assume that I'm a reporter, which is not untrue. Multimedia journalist just is a little different of a role, which you'll see more and more often nowadays. It is someone who not only writes the story and interviews people, but I also shoot my own stories and edit my own stories and pitch my own stories. And so it's a little bit of a one-man band, if you will. So it's different. And there's always times when you get to work with a photographer, which is fun. But I was also always the kid growing up in school that when we were in a group project, I was like, just let me do it and you can put your names on it after.
Let me run the camera. It'll be better. Just go away.
Fine, we'll get an A. Just put your name on it after. Like, I'd rather just have it done. And so it works for me. I like it. I like knowing that when I'm interviewing someone, I can genuinely say like, that I know how this story is going to work. Obviously, there are a couple layers of people who go over my script and we can talk through things, and that's very good and helpful discussion. But it feels more intimate when I'm talking with someone, knowing that when they are giving me their trust on either their best day or their worst day, I feel like I can hold that trust and honor it.
What's your shift usually? Not that it always is the same, but
yeah, the shift is always shifting. I feel like in news, right? Typically, though, you will find me on the day side hours, so 9:30 to 6. But if you're live in the 6, it may be more like 6:30, 7:30, who knows? So reporting for the 4, 5, 6 p.m. shows, sometimes the midday if there's a court case or some breaking news that I'm on.
So for folks that don't understand the dynamics of a TV news day, how far in advance are you deciding on a story for that day?
Generally, it's in our 9:30 meeting. So I come in and that's where we start. We come in, we go over weather, things that are popping off on digital, some trending news that we know about, maybe any meetings or court cases that we already have on the calendar. And then the reporters pitch their stories. And so you're usually pitching about 3 stories, I would say, on average. Sometimes you have the days where you're like, oh, we could do this today. And it's always those days that they go for those pitches and you're like, That was really one that I threw out there, guys, but we'll make it work. We'll call Mitch.
But I do get calls from folks that usually it's out of sometimes the night side team who will say, "All right, I'm going to pitch this in the afternoon. It's 10 o'clock in the morning now. I'm going to pitch this later. I might or might not get assigned to it, but if I do, can you find somebody to help me, talk about this angle?" And it's I don't know what the percentage is. So sometimes it actually happens, and sometimes it doesn't, and we kind of talk to our sources and say, okay, this might happen later this afternoon. And you can usually kind of get a feel for if it's a bigger story, right? It's more likely to happen if it's more featurey or not as this has to happen today kind of thing then maybe not, right?
Totally. Yeah. And that's why people like you are so helpful because I feel like you just have a Rolodex of people that I know, like, okay, well, I can call Mitch and he can help me brainstorm someone who would be perfect for this. And you always find really good people, which I appreciate, that can talk at a third grade level, especially when we're doing so many stories lately. I feel like you've been on speed dial for me about tariffs when I'm like, you're going to be teaching me in this interview. So help me out here.
I cannot tell you how many tariff, oh, I probably could tell you, but I mean, 100 interviews in the last 2 months on tariffs with different folks. I
Well,
mean,
spoiler
it's
alert,
been
I might be pitching another angle today. So go ahead and prepare something.
all right. So, how long have you been at Channel 11?
Oh my goodness, math. Just over 3 years.
3 years. Okay. And what was your path that brought you there? But kind of where were you before that?
So this is my third stop. I was in Wilmington, North Carolina first, which I've loved and was a great first market because I feel like usually your first market is a small town in the middle of nowhere. And I ended up in a cute beach town in North Carolina. And I love North Carolina. It's one of my favorite states. So started there, kind of did all the shifts, day side, then they moved me night side because they liked me live and you were live more often nights. And then they switched me mornings because they wanted me live even more, which that was a blast. I feel like in that role, I really lost my news voice, so to speak, and started just really being comfortable with being Molly on TV, which is a huge lesson that I'm so grateful for to have learned with some really loving people in that market. And then hopped over to Austin, Texas. That one was a longer stop than I planned for a couple of reasons. I had never been to Texas before until I interviewed. I absolutely fell in love with it. A lot of my best friends I met there and are still there. And then this like crazy thing called the pandemic happened. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember, it was just such a
Yeah.
little
I heard
blip.
about that. I think I saw that on the news maybe. Yeah.
There's maybe like an article or two about it.
Well, it's funny. I've had a lot of friends who have started in markets like Idaho Falls, Idaho, which when I worked at CNN, we had an intern and she's like, I got a job offer at Idaho Falls, Idaho. She's like, I don't know where that is. I said, well, let's look it up. I said, and let's look at the average temperatures in Idaho Falls, Idaho in the winter. It is very cold.
Yeah, when I told my dad I got a job in Wilmington, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna live in Virginia?" I'm like, "Not that Wilmington,
Not,
smaller."
but that's good though. That's good though. Yeah, because you get a lot of folks who are like, starting out in Idaho or Wyoming or you know, smaller, really like markets over 200, and they'll be there for a year or two. And even in Georgia, you see a lot of churn in the markets outside Atlanta. I
Mhm.
mean, Macon, Augusta, Savannah, there's people there for a year or two, and then they move on, and sometimes they move on to a bigger market. And I mean, there's folks who stay there forever, which is good too, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think the people who do stay there forever and find a home are such a blessing to new reporters who come in, like I have, and they have that immediate person who they can look to of here are contacts that I have, or here's a place for dinner, or I've had anchors bring me into their family holidays before. And so it's just having those second homes almost and second families, so to speak, that really
Right.
make those newer markets where it could be so overwhelming in a job that you're often not working hours that line up with meeting people. Um, it's nice to have those strongholds in each market. It's definitely a blessing.
Yeah, I've had some years where I brought some orphan reporters home for Thanksgiving because they like I gotta work Thanksgiving Day, but then I have nowhere to go later. So, all right, we'll find you somewhere. Come have dinner with us.
Come have some
You know,
church.
yeah, right, yeah, because like yeah, and especially the ones who are really new to the market, who haven't you know met a lot of folks yet. I started doing this God, probably 10 years ago. I did a blog post called I don't know, Mitch's Guide to How to Pronounce Places and Things in Georgia.
That's so helpful when you're a new reporter.
Right. So every time I see a new reporter, I will send them the link to this. I'm like, okay, here's it's like it's not Ponce de Leon Avenue Boulevard. It's not Cairo, Georgia. It's Cairo. It's not Houston Mill Road. It's Houston Mill Road. All those weird Georgia names that I guess every city I'm sure has them, but I can always tell like the new anchors because they're talking about Gwinnett County or something like that.
I
It's
remember in
good.
Austin, they have a lot of obviously like Spanish influences there. And there's so many names that if you were not in Austin and if you are a Spanish speaking individual, I'm like, are we offending them by saying it this way? Because
Right.
it sounds like you're butchering it. But if you say it the proper way that you would think, you will get email after email after email. And so everyone's like, it's just, we know you took Spanish. We know what you think it is.
Yeah.
It's not that though here. You got
Right. Yeah.
San Jacinto, you say San Jack. And it's like they're like almost the more offensive it sounds, probably the more right you are. And I'm like, oh, but they gave us the pronunciation sheet when I got there too of like, go ahead and memorize it so you don't get the emails.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while, somebody will say, "Okay, here's another one to add to your list," and I should send it to you. It's
Please
fun.
do. That would be a huge help, I feel like,
I,
for
I,
not only
I,
myself, but any new reporter.
I think you're probably good at this point, 3 years in. Hopefully.
I
You know,
hopefully
y-
have it down by now, but it's all
right.
to learn.
Well, it's funny you were talking about TV voice. There are sometimes you see folks who have the radio voice or the TV voice, and it's totally different from what their normal voice is. Usually it's deeper and different paced, right? But it is nice to kind of when you meet people and their real voice it is their TV voice, and it is a more personal, conversational kind of thing. I've never been a fan of radio or TV reporters who I don't know they'll toss in a big word when a small simple word will do, right?
Yeah, I always think TV reporting like somehow worked out for me really well because like I said the third like I feel like I think at a fifth grade level most of the time. So it works easier. And I don't know if you know this about me. I was in sports. I was always going to do sports journalism.
Okay.
So I never thought I was like news is the dark sides. Get away from me. You guys are just sad all the time. I want to do the fun sports. So I
Sport,
think
yeah.
that also has helped me not only with ad libbing, but hopefully people think that I'm a bit more conversational.
There was a time when people thought that, sports TV journalism was not going to survive. It was like, okay, no, nobody watches that anymore. No, people just get their stuff online. But I feel like it is, I don't want to say settled in, but it's still pretty solid. I mean, most out of the stations have, maybe all the stations have, they'll have like a Friday sports show and on the weekends, and their sports reporters are covering lots of things. So I think people still want to see the sports news covered that way.
I think there's power in local journalism and I think there's power in local sports too. I think you're getting angles to different stories that you just wouldn't see when a national journalist comes in. Like there's just those relationships that are built through local
Yeah.
journalism because we're actually in the community and I think you can see those relationships on camera and I think they do play out.
How many times in the last couple of years have we seen a national journalist, as they say, parachute in and do some story, and everybody's like, How, what is this? This is the top restaurant in Atlanta. It's like no one's ever heard of it, or no one goes there. And they went to this town and they did what? They do what there? And it's just, it's kind of like it's yeah, you're right. It's the local folks who know the markets. So when you're looking at stories, are there certain topics that kind of resonate with you that like, okay, I really want to cover this kind of story.
In my perfect world, Mitch, I am covering stories that are a bit more feature-esque. Unfortunately, there's not always a time or place for that or staffing for that
Sure.
because it's Atlanta and it's a big market and there's a lot of crime here, which means we do have to cover the big topics. So Dream Store, every once in a while I'll get to do a story with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and those are just stories that like, oh, they make my heart like just feel so good because there's these little kids battling so much, like cancer or heart transplants or whatever that they're going through. But they're just these cute, bubbly kids, and they're like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, just keep trying. And I'm like, I'm learning so much just talking to you, and you're 7 years old. So
Right.
those are my favorite. I always think a really good story is something that can make people think, laugh, or cry. And then I think a great story is something that'll make you do all three. And so that's always my goal with stories. And it does become a little bit more of a challenge if you're covering a city council meeting versus a cute toddler who just beat cancer, but you got to find ways to get creative.
So if folks have story ideas, and I'm sure many people do, but what would you suggest in terms of how far in advance should they reach out to you? How long or short a pitch should they send you, and what's a key thing that needs to be in there?
I always think the best pitches when they come in for us is telling us the who, what, where, when, and why. Just those five simple questions of what's the pitch, who's available, when are they available, why is this going to be a good story, etc. So I think keeping those bullet points is really helpful. We sadly get, and you, I'm sure, get this too, so many emails a day that so many things get lost in a shuffle. So I also think a huge asset is if you have individual reporters' emails, because then it'll go directly to their inbox. Like I know personally, I have my inbox set up where I have about 15 different folders because we just get so many random emails coming in that I try to shuffle only the ones to me in one area just to keep me a little on track better. So that would be my
Yeah.
best suggestion is just have the baseline. And then as far as how far out to reach in advance, I would say a couple days. I think that's great to always get something on the calendar. Those are my favorite days when I don't have to come into a meeting and pitch, when I'm like, I'm already set up, I'm good, the interview's at 10, see you later, and I get out of the newsroom because I do best when I'm out of the newsroom in the field talking to people. That's my favorite part of the job. So I think a couple of days, make sure the availability is very clear in the email. That's always a huge help too, so we're not having to ask.
What is the thing that people either forget to put in the pitches, or when you call them don't have that, like, okay, what, like, well, my pet peeve is when a client, or not, my clients don't do this, but other people's clients, when they'll put out a press release and quote the CEO, and then a reporter calls and says, okay, I like this story, I want to talk to your CEO, and they say, well, he's on vacation this week. Well, then why did you make this announcement this week?
I would
Who
say
else?
that's a tough one. If somebody's quoted in what your pitch you're sending me, I'm usually gonna hope that they can speak, especially if it's like a fantastic quote. And you're like,
Right,
whoa,
right.
pack some punch. And you call and they're like, they're not available that day, but we could get you next week. And I think you understand this news works on such a weird deadline that maybe not everyone understands. But when we pitch our stories at 9:30, those aren't stories we're pitching for next week. Those are stories we're pitching. Like, I gotta go shoot
That's
it that day. I gotta
right.
edit it, and it airs at
Yeah,
4 o'clock.
yeah. I get that sometimes. We try to train our clients. Kim and I we'll train our clients, like, we're gonna call you with a story, at 95% of the stories we call you about are for today. There's some that are, hey, we could do this week, or hey, I'm thinking about this for next week. But those are mostly print or magazines, that kind of thing. Um, but the TV stuff is almost always today, and sometimes it's, you know, 2 hours from now, or an hour, yeah, or an hour from now.
I have
I
different like calls where I'm like, I have 30 minutes. Please help. They just switched me to this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got a call. What's today? Friday. I got a call Wednesday night from a reporter, not at your station, but another one, and it was 7:30 in the evening, and he was nightside, and he says, I need someone for this story. And I said, did you just get assigned this? He said, no. I said, I had an interview for my 11 o'clock hit, and he just bailed on me. It's like, oh, that's which is lame. I mean, that sucks. So
It's not great when you get an interview bailing, especially when you're like, oh, I got
Right.
someone. And then all of a
Right.
sudden they're to text you and you're like, or they ghost you.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
when they say they're going to do it, and then they it's like, yeah, okay, I don't really want to do it. That's annoying. But we found him a source, and then he got bumped over to some breaking news anyway. So, but it was like 9:30 at night, and I was like, okay, well, we'll find you somebody, and I found him somebody fairly fairly quickly. But yeah, so that's one of the interesting things we teach people is that quick turnaround of the news cycle. Because people and I get people like, oh, I'm traveling today, but I can do it tomorrow morning. Like, that's not going to work. You know,
it is funny
thanks.
when I interview people because I just don't think it's common knowledge and I don't expect anyone to know that. But it's funny when I'll be out interviewing people, just man on the street is what we call it. And they're like, so when is this going to air? And I'm like, 2 hours. And they're like,
About an
oh,
hour, about an hour from now. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna be in front of a TV in about 20 minutes. Yeah, that's when it's gonna air.
you got to do some makeup in like the back seat of my car real quick. But
I think probably the quickest turn I usually have is radio. I've had occasion where someone like, especially with like reports, economic reports and things. Okay, this report comes out at 8:30. They need somebody, and then they're on the air at 8:45 with a hit saying, "Oh, we've got so and so said this about this report that came out 10 minutes ago." Yeah, that's about the fastest turn that we usually do for that kind of thing.
they're a new level of deadline. Mad respect for all my radio friends out there.
Yeah, yeah. But I always tell folks a lot of it is anticipation, right? You have to look ahead and figure out here's what's going to happen today and get your people ready. And then when it happens, you're not rushing around. I mean, you can look ahead and all these economic reports that come out every month, you know exactly what day, you know exactly what time they're going to come out. There's usually a little bit of here's what we expect the report to say. So it's usually not a total surprise as to what the report's going to say. And then things like, the president has said, okay, my tariff deadline is June 1st. So you will note in the calendar saying, okay, I need my tariff people ready on June 1st when the
Right.
president makes a decision one way or another about tariffs. Or, June is Supreme Court ruling. So Kim and I are, we have a schedule of what the cases are and who the professors are at Emory Law who can talk about each topic. So but we don't. But the trick is you don't know which case is going to come down each day, right?
Yeah.
The court doesn't say, okay, we're going to rule on this case today. It's just some ruling on one of their cases is going to come out sometime this week, and you just have to listen and hope you get the right. Hope you got the right person. So uh, let's jump to the okay. So this is the hardest question I always ask folks.
Oh, no.
What is the coolest thing about Molly that people might not know?
Mitch, we have discussed this. I just surround myself with cool people.
All right, there you go. There you go.
Let's see. Cool thing about me. Oh
And
gosh.
it could be a hobby or something you collect, or ability to sing, classic Christmas music that people might not realize that you do,
I
like
did
Joe
used to
Ripley.
do musicals, but like in middle school, maybe a year in high school, and then
Okay,
my
there you go.
athletic teams were like, "It's you can't be doing both. You got to come." I guess cool things. I used to play competitive beach volleyball. I was paid to play for a little bit, which helped me make rent in my first market. So that was fantastic. Got a pretty bad injury a couple years ago, so still rehabbing from that. So not currently playing as much. My dog, I think my dog is cool. He's actually trained as a therapy dog. So that's fun. We did a lot of work with that in Austin when we were there. He would go visit like firefighters and things like that.
That's great.
So yeah, that was, and I sat on a board that helped train service and therapy dogs too. So it was fun to get to just bring my dog to the meetings while he hung out. But
We had
it's,
a we had a friend who was involved with training therapy dogs for a long time, and one of the you know this one of the trainings is you have to get them used to being around groups of people and loud noises and all that kind of thing. So she would bring them to Boy Scout summer camp where they had to be around like hundreds of running 11, 12, 13-year-old kids running around all the time. And that was like the ultimate. It's like if the dog can deal with that, the dog can deal with anything.
yeah, it's funny. Roy is my dog's name. He's named after, I went to UNC, and I was when I was doing sports journalism, I mostly was always at the basketball games. That was my main sport I shot. And just I was never a basketball like watcher. I played basketball growing up, but in Florida, that's such a football state. My brother played football in college, so we were always a big football family. But when you go to UNC, you kind of get forced into loving basketball. And everyone's like, "You'll
One way or
get,
another.
don't worry." And then now it's like my friends, if they watch a UNC Duke basketball game with me, they're like, "Oh, this is why you usually watch games alone." Now we see it. But Roy is named after the head coach when I was there, Roy Williams, who is
Yeah.
also a gem of a human, and always enjoyed chatting with him and getting to know him. So we have little Roy hanging out. He's currently sleeping off camera.
All right. Well, that's good. Roy missed his cameo. That's all right. We may drop a picture of Roy into the edited copy later just to give him his moment in the sun. All right. So next couple of questions are kind of, I call this the lightning round. So you don't have to do long answers, but just kind of short answers to some fun questions to learn fun things about Molly. So last book you've read or the last podcast you've listened to.
Oh, okay. This is funny because they're two wildly different ones. I just started listening to the podcast Good Hang, Amy Poehler. It is fantastic, and it's a great podcast if you truly want to just shut your brain off. I think her first episode was she was like, "This is a podcast where I don't want to teach you anything. I'm not going to make you a better person, but if you want to just feel good and listen in." And
Oh,
then
that's great.
in the middle of rereading a book by Bob Goff called Everybody Always. So very opposite ends of the spectrum where you are going to be thinking a lot with that one. So
Okay.
it kind of depends how
Very
I'm
good.
going my work day.
All right. Favorite local restaurant.
Ooh, it would have to be between Little Ray is one that I'm at pretty constantly. It's also right by the station. So
Yeah, yeah.
you'll have a lot of us going and grabbing some margaritas after work. And they have dangerously good margaritas. So probably Little Ray is the one I frequent the most, but I also love Yeppa too, because you just can't beat
I
Italian.
don't know Yeppa. So what is Yeppa?
Yeppa is an Italian spot. It's in Buckhead Village, but I believe they just opened one on the Beltline. I think it opened about a week ago.
Okay.
I hear they're going to
Yeppa.
have a gelato window too, so I got to go check that out at some
All
point.
right, I'll put that one on my list. Okay. Favorite guilty pleasure.
Oh gosh, this is embarrassing.
This one's supposed to be embarrassing.
Only because I'm such a sarcastic sports girl. But when I need something real good, I'm watching a Hallmark movie. And I'm talking like the cheesy Christmas movies if I'm stressed out, because I know everyone's going to fall in love and everyone's going to be happy at the end. And it's another one of those like, shut your brain off. You don't have to think.
There you go. All right. Favorite local getaway.
This is actually one I need help with. I don't know a ton of local getaways here. I'm from Florida, born and raised, so I get away to Florida a good bit. But I think any of the like smaller towns, the further north I go, the more I seem to love them because they just have all that charm. Even something like Roswell, but any town with like a cute downtown. Up in Blue Ridge, I got to be there for all the snow, and that was so fun. And everyone's always so nice and just welcoming. So I love a small town.
All right, we're gonna have to get you to St. Simon's. That's a beach town and a small
Yes,
town.
I would love
Yeah,
that. I'm
that's a
definitely an
great one.
ocean girl being raised in Florida.
All right. Favorite non-work hobby.
Honestly, just walking my dog, training him, hanging out with him. Beach volleyball would have always been my answer, but that's put on pause right now. That's okay because we're
Well,
finding.
I feel like WXIA, you could be like the coach of the WXIA beach volleyball team. That way you don't have to, exacerbate the injury, but you could coach and you get like, let's see, who would be your spiker? Who's the tall? Cheryl, Caitlin.
Cheryl and Caitlin are. We have some tall women
Get
at
some,
11
get some tall, get some
As
tall
someone who's
people.
also tall, it's fantastic because I feel like we're all there. Grace is tall too. Like we got some tall ladies there. It's fantastic.
All right. Well, something to think about. Talk to the news director. I think, a little competition with the other stations wouldn't hurt, right?
We'll have a
Little beach one.
local news beach volleyball tournament this
There you
summer.
go. There you go. I'll sponsor that. All right. We have been talking with Molly Oak, not general assignment, MMJ,
You're right,
multimedia
general
journalist.
assignment. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right.
But there's a difference between general assignment and MMJ in that, right? In that MMJ is usually shooting themselves, or general assignment might have a photographer with them, right?
We're still general assignment. It's either if you
Okay.
look at the difference between like a standard reporter and MMJ, and honestly, I'm not offended if anyone calls me a reporter because I am a reporter.
Yeah.
I usually just say journalist. It just covers it.
I think folks don't I think more folks will know if I say, oh, she's a general assignment reporter, they'll understand that better than if I say she's an MMJ or a multimedia journalist, because that's like, what is that? That's extra stuff, but what is it? What is an MMJ? What does that mean?
Call me whatever you want.
Molly, thank you so much for taking some time with us. And
Of course, Mitch, this is always fun, and I'll probably be calling you later for a story.
very good, very good. Uh, and as always, you can find our archive of Four Questions Journalist Spotlights on YouTube in the video format or in audio format on Amazon or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are looking for our database of Atlanta journalists, go to, wait, over that shoulder, leffsatlantamedia.com, our database of local journalists. And we will see everyone in 2 weeks.